Nobody warns you that the woman who makes you laugh the hardest can also be the best liar you'll ever meet. I didn't figure that out in one clean moment. It came at me sideways, in pieces I kept excusing because I was 62 years old, twice divorced from bad decisions in my 30s, and for the first time in a long while, genuinely happy. Her name was Renata. For 16 months, I thought she was the reason my second half of life finally made sense. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Folks who know me know my name is Walter Hutchins. I own a fleet of towing and roadside service trucks across 3 counties outside Nashville, Tennessee. Started with one truck in 1987 and a phone that rang maybe twice a week. Built it into something that keeps 42 men employed and lets me sleep at night knowing my name is good on a handshake. My son, Dale, runs the dispatch side now. My daughter, Marisol, handles the books better than any accountant I ever paid for. Family built this. Family runs it. That's never changed, not once, in almost 40 years. We're Hutchins from Wilson County, and we've been in this dirt for 5 generations. My late wife, Carol, passed 11 years ago, cancer, and I won't pretend that hollowed me out for a long stretch. My daughter still hosts Sunday supper at her place outside Lebanon, and it isn't optional. You show up, you eat, you sit at the table till everybody's done. That's just how it is. My brother Ray lives 15 minutes down Highway 70 and shows up whether he's invited or not, usually right when the cornbread comes out of the oven. We're loud, we're close. And when I tell you I met Renata at a charity fish fry for the volunteer fire department last spring, and that 3 months later I was completely gone on this woman, understand what that means coming from a man my age who thought that chapter of his life was closed for good. I don't fall easy. Not anymore. I'd had one serious relationship since Carol passed, and it ended quiet, no drama, just two people wanting different things. Renata felt different from the first conversation. She walked into that fish fry in a blue dress that didn't belong at a firehouse fundraiser, laughed at my brother Ray's terrible joke about diesel prices within 5 minutes of meeting him, and then turned to my daughter and asked, genuinely, not just being polite, for her recipe for banana pudding. Marisol grabbed her by the arm, and the two of them talked for half an hour straight. I stood there, watching it happen, and thought, so this is how it goes. We were together 14 months before I asked her to marry me, up on the rooftop deck of a restaurant downtown on the Cumberland River, a Tuesday evening in early fall. Ring, a bottle of the good bourbon, the whole thing. She said yes before I finished the question. My daughter cried when I called her. My son said, good, now, bring her to Sunday supper, so Marisol can feed her right. Ray somehow already knew before I told him. To this day, I don't know how I managed to be that happy, genuinely, completely happy, and have absolutely no idea what was coming. Here's what I want you to understand about Renata before anything else. She wasn't cold. She wasn't standoffish. She was warm, quick with a laugh, and she made me feel, every single day, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be at this stage of my life. So when the subject of her family came up, and it came up early because in my world family comes up early, her answer didn't strike me as a red flag. It felt like an old wound. My parents and I don't speak, she told me one night, maybe 5 weeks in. We were sitting on her back porch outside Murfreesboro, a couple of beers between us, crickets going. It's not something I talk about much. They won't be at the wedding. I need you to understand that going in. I told her it didn't matter to me, and at the time, it didn't, because I trusted her. She hadn't given me a reason not to. What I didn't fully account for was my family. Not that they were hostile toward Renata. They weren't, not even close. But the Hutchins clan runs on one particular frequency, and that frequency includes a deep need to know the people connected to the people we love. It isn't nosiness. It isn't judgment. We just believe you understand a person better once you know where they came from, who raised them, and whose table they sat at growing up. And by month 11 of our engagement, the silence around Renata's family had started making its own kind of noise. It came to a head on a Sunday evening in late July, over Marisol's chicken and dumplings, the real recipe, the one that takes most of a Saturday to get right. We were all around that table, me, Renata, Dale, Marisol and her husband, and Ray, who never once in his life has paid attention to social cues. He set his fork down and looked at Renata dead on. Renata, "Honey, I gotta ask you something." She smiled. "Sure, Ray. Where's your people at?" The table went quiet the way it does when somebody says the thing everybody's been carefully stepping around. Renata's smile stayed put, but her eyes shifted just slightly. "My parents and I aren't in touch." "I've mentioned that." "I know you mentioned it. I'm asking about it." Ray wasn't being cruel. He was just being Ray. "Because in our family, and I say this with love, you don't marry into a family you've never laid eyes on. It isn't how we do things." "Ray." My voice. One low word. He picked his fork back up. But the question was already sitting there on the table, and no amount of chicken and dumplings was going to bury it. Later, after Renata had gone home, my son found me in the kitchen, poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon, and leaned against the counter. "She's a good woman," he said, not a question. "She is. I believe her." He nodded slow. "But Dad, we're going to stand up in a church. We're going to make promises in front of God and everybody we know. And we're going to do it without ever meeting one person from her family. Her parents are toxic. She had a hard time, I get it. I believe her." He set the glass down. "But toxic people still exist somewhere. They got an address." He looked right at me. "I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm asking you to know what you're walking into." I didn't say anything back. He patted my shoulder and went back to the dining room. I stood in my daughter's kitchen a long while after that. But here's what you need to understand. I still wasn't suspicious. Not exactly. Not of Renata. If anything, I was worried about myself. Because the thought I couldn't shake, the one that kept surfacing on the drive back to my place, was this. What if her parents look at me and decide I'm not what they wanted for their daughter? I know how that sounds coming from a man who's built something solid with his own 2 hands. But Renata moved in a world I wasn't always comfortable in. Marketing consultants, wine club memberships, a condo decorated like something out of a magazine. Her friends wore brand names I had to look up. She carried herself with a polish that I found attractive, but that, quietly, sometimes made me feel a little too plain, a little too country, a little too much like a man who still smells like diesel at the end of the day. What if her parents were the same? What if they had money, standards, expectations I couldn't guess at? That was my real fear, driving north on I-40 the following Saturday morning. Not that I'd uncover a lie. Just that I'd meet people intimidating enough to decide I wasn't good enough. Finding her parents hadn't taken a private investigator, just a routine, tedious piece of paperwork. Renata had moved into a rental property that belonged to my company, one of the units Marisol manages for tax purposes, and since we were getting married in a matter of weeks, our office needed her to formally sign the corporate lease documents. I was at my desk on a Friday afternoon when Marisol dropped the processed paperwork on my desk. I looked down at the official ID she'd uploaded to the portal. Renata Louise Kowalczyk. Not Hale, the name she used on social media and introduced to my friends. Kowalczyk. Out of pure curiosity, I ran a quick property search under that name. A few clicks turned up an old public record, a dormant Facebook page untouched since college, and a home address on Sycamore Street in a little town called Watertown, about 45 minutes east. I told Renata I had a job site to check on. She kissed me goodbye without looking up from her laptop. On the drive, I ran through introductions in my head, quietly dreading the moment somebody opened that door and looked at me like I wasn't what they had in mind. I got off the highway and rolled into Watertown right around 10 in the morning. Followed the GPS into a neighborhood of modest brick ranch houses, clean streets, American flags on porches, the kind of place where people know their neighbors by name and wave from the yard. I slowed down, found the house. A well-kept little place with a vegetable garden along the side and a porch swing out front. And in the yard, moving slow with a hose, was an older man in a faded Titans t-shirt and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, watering tomato plants with the unhurried patience of a man who had nothing more pressing to do. This isn't what I pictured. I sat in the truck, a full 5 minutes, recalibrating everything. No gate, no fancy car in the driveway. Not one sign that the people living in this house had ever spent a single moment wondering if somebody else was good enough for anything. These weren't intimidating people. These were plain, ordinary, decent people. And for one unmistakable moment, I felt real relief. I got out and walked up the drive. He spotted me when I was about 10 feet off, and narrowed his eyes with that cautious look folks get when a stranger walks up. "Can I help you with something?" I stopped, took a breath. "Sir, you don't know me. My name's Walter Hutchins. I'm engaged to your daughter, Renata." Frank Kowalczyk let go of the hose. Not dropped it clumsy, just let it fall. Water ran slow across the driveway while he stared at me, and his face did something I wasn't ready for at all. It broke. Not with anger, not with suspicion, with relief. 2 years of stacked up grief, finally finding somewhere to land. "Dottie," his voice cracked on the name. "Dottie, come out here." And in that exact moment, standing on the porch of a house in Watertown, watching a retired railroad man try to pull himself back together, my whole understanding of the situation turned clean over. Inside the Kowalczyk house, everything I thought I knew about Renata started coming apart. Quiet, methodical, over a cup of coffee I hadn't asked for and a plate of shortbread Dottie set down with shaking hands. The house was clean and modest and completely full of Renata. School pictures, birthday photos, a prom picture on the mantel, a college graduation portrait where Frank and Dottie stood on either side of her, beaming. Frank had his arm around her shoulders. Dottie's face was so proud, it almost hurt to look at. These weren't the faces of abusive people. These were the faces of parents who missed their daughter. The story came out careful. Frank had worked the railroad 34 years before he retired. Dottie had been a church secretary most of Renata's childhood. They'd helped put her through Middle Tennessee State. Full scholarship, no debt to her parents, and they were proud of that, deeply proud. When Renata moved to Nashville and started building her career, things changed slow. Calls got shorter. Visits stopped. She started showing up in photos online under a different name, Hale, her middle name. At events with people Frank and Dottie didn't recognize, wearing a version of herself they didn't quite know either. Then came the wedding conversation, the ask for $80,000. Frank's counteroffer, heavy with disappointment, of $12,000. Everything they could give without wrecking their retirement. Renata's response: "If you can't invest in my future, you're not part of it." Blocked that same night, Dottie slid something across the table. A sealed birthday card, never opened, stamped return to sender in red. Renata's handwriting on the return address label. Their address. I sat there staring at that red stamp on the envelope, then slowly pulled my phone out of my pocket. Opened the text Renata had sent me the night before, the one I'd read right before falling asleep, the one that had pushed me to make this whole trip in the first place. "Honey, wonderful news. I reached out to my parents. They finally apologized for everything and want to meet you for lunch before they head out of town. I'm so excited for you to finally meet them." The kitchen went very quiet. I looked up slow. Frank and Dottie Kowalczyk sat right across from me, completely unaware of the digital reality their daughter was constructing in real time. I turned the phone around and showed them the screen. Dottie read it, set the phone down gently and didn't say a word. Frank looked out the kitchen window at the tomatoes he'd been watering when I pulled up. I thought about the drive, the rehearsed introductions, my quiet fear of not being good enough for these people. I almost laughed. Almost laughed because I'd spent weeks worried Renata's parents would look down on me, that they'd be too refined, too demanding. And here they were in Watertown, in a brick ranch on Sycamore Street, with a garden hose and 2 years of unopened birthday cards. The person who'd decided somebody wasn't good enough wasn't them. It was her. It had always been her. And just like that, the man who'd driven up I-40 nervous about making a good impression, that man was gone. The man driving back to Nashville that afternoon was thinking about something else entirely. The difference between a good liar and a great one is the great one never breaks character. Not even at the table, not even while everything's coming apart. I didn't confront her that night. I want to be clear about that, because it matters. I got back to my place a little after 2, sat in the truck 10 full minutes, and made a very deliberate decision. Not yet. Not because I was scared. Not because I doubted what I'd just seen and heard in that kitchen. But because I'm my father's son, and my father, God rest him, taught me something about timing before a confrontation that most people get backward. He used to say, "Walter, the one who reacts first almost never wins. Let them finish the lie. A half-told lie is just an argument. A lie told all the way through is a confession." I let myself in. Renata was on the couch, with a glass of white wine and her laptop open to a wedding venue website. She looked up and smiled the way she always did. Warm, easy, like I was the best part of her day. How was the site visit? Promising, I said. Long drive, though. You look tired. Want me to order something? I want you to explain why your mother's birthday card is sitting in a drawer in Watertown with our return address stamped and unopened on it. That's what I want. Sure, I said. Whatever sounds good to you. I sat down next to her. She leaned her head on my shoulder a second and went back to scrolling venues. I looked at the screen without seeing a thing. Outside, completely normal. Inside, I was taking the whole thing apart piece by piece. That night, I lay in the dark and did what I do when I'm working through something complicated. I separated what I knew from what I assumed, and I built a timeline. As far as I knew, Renata's real name was Kowalczyk. Her parents were Frank and Dottie of Watertown, Tennessee, alive, present, and heartbroken. They hadn't abused her. They hadn't been controlling or toxic in any way Renata had described. They'd offered $12,000 toward the wedding, been told it wasn't enough, and been erased that same night. As far as I knew, Renata had texted me while sitting in her parents' own kitchen, telling me those same parents had apologized and wanted to meet me for lunch, which meant she was already building the next floor of the lie, which meant there was a next floor, which meant somebody existed who she planned to bring to that lunch. Who? That was the question I was trying to answer before sleep finally took me. I didn't have to wait long. Over the next few days, I paid attention differently, not suspicious. I was careful about that. I didn't check her phone. I didn't follow her. I just listened. The way you listen once you finally understand every conversation's been running on two levels at once, and you'd only ever been hearing one of them. I noticed her mentioning her boss more than usual, a man named Gordon Ashwell. Gordon thinks, casually, that the Prescott account might close soon or without warning. Apparently his wife, Diane, had been at that same fish fry fundraiser. Small mentions, nothing alarming, the kind of thing a person drops into conversation when they're trying to get someone comfortable with a name before that name becomes important. She was getting me used to them. Had been for weeks, and I'd never once caught it. Gordon Ashwell. I looked him up from my office the following Tuesday morning. Door shut. Senior partner at a wealth management firm downtown. His photo on the company website showed a man in his late 50s, silver hair, that particular ease that only comes from decades of never having to justify yourself anywhere. His wife, Diane, turned up in a society column about a charity gala 2 years back. Polished, put together, the full picture. A wealthy, respectable couple. Exactly the kind of people you'd want beside you if you were trying to convince a close-knit Southern family you came from somewhere impressive. There they are. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the Ashwells' corporate photo. A long moment. That's when it hit me that Renata wasn't just a liar. She was trapped in a prison of her own enormous insecurity. She'd spent a decade reinventing herself in Nashville, reshaping her identity to climb a social ladder that meant nothing to me but everything to her downtown friends. When her father wouldn't sacrifice his retirement for one day of theater, it wasn't just a financial disagreement to her. In her mind, his modesty threatened the polished illusion of belonging she'd sacrificed so much to build. To keep the lie alive, she hadn't just distanced herself from them, she'd had to erase them completely. And then I thought about what she must have told the Ashwells to get them to agree to this, because here's what I know about people like Gordon and Diane Ashwell. They didn't get where they are by being careless or foolish. For Renata to get them to sit down at a lunch and present themselves as her parents, she'd have had to give them something that made sense. A coherent story, something moving enough that two busy, important people would say yes without asking too many questions. What did she tell them? I let it sit 2 days, and Thursday morning my phone buzzed with a reminder Renata had added to our shared calendar. Lunch, Gordon and Diane, at the Hermitage Room. Saturday, 12:30. She'd added a note underneath. Can't wait for you to finally meet them, honey. This means everything to me. I stared at that note a long time. Means everything to me. I thought about Dottie Kowalczyk pressing a sealed birthday card across her kitchen table. I thought about Frank's face when he read that text over my shoulder. Yeah, I bet it does. That same Thursday I called my son from my truck, engine running, parked outside the shop. He picked up on the second ring. Need to talk to you. Come by the house. 20 minutes later, I was sitting at Marisol's kitchen table. The same table where Renata had charmed everybody 2 weeks before, where Ray had asked his question, where everything had seemed completely normal. And I laid it out, all of it. Watertown, Frank, and Dottie, the birthday card, the text, Gordon and Diane Ashwell. Dale sat across from me with his hands folded and listened without cutting in once. When I finished, the kitchen went quiet a moment. Then he said, "What do you need?" 4 words. That's it. No lecture, no dramatic reaction. I need to build something bigger, I said. Dale nodded slow. What about the Kowalczyks? I'm going back to Watertown after the lunch. I want to know if they're willing to be part of what comes next. He looked at me steady. And what comes after that? A dinner, I said. A real gathering with the right people in the room. Another pause. Then my son stood up, straightened his jacket, and said, I'll talk to Marisol about the venue. That was the whole conversation. My daughter's reaction was a little less contained. She came in from the living room, where she'd apparently been listening to the whole thing, which in our house isn't considered eavesdropping. It's just being present, and stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, and an expression I can only describe as the specific fury of a southern woman who's fed somebody her chicken and dumplings and been lied to in return. She sat down at the table. Dad, she said, that woman ate my cooking at my table, and her mother's sitting in Watertown with a birthday card that got sent back unopened. I know, sweetheart. She stared at me a long moment. Then she reached over and put both hands on my face, the same move she's been doing since she was 6 years old, and wanted my full attention. You're going to fix this, she said quietly. Not just for you. For them too. Saturday came. The Hermitage Room downtown is exactly the kind of place where the lighting is built to make everybody look a little more important than they actually are. Renata had made the reservation. As expected, I got there 5 minutes early and sat facing the door. They arrived together, Renata in the middle, one hand hooked through Gordon Ashwell's arm, Diane on her other side. Renata was glowing. Gordon moved with the ease of a man who'd never once questioned whether he belonged somewhere. Diane was all polite smiles and careful posture. I stood when they reached the table. Big smile, firm handshake. Dad, Renata said, her voice tinted with a particular triumph. This is my father, Gordon, and my mother, Diane. Gordon, Diane. Not Frank, not Dottie. Gordon, Diane. I shook both their hands. Heard so much about you both. I hadn't heard anything about them, because they hadn't existed in this role until about a week ago. We sat, opened menus, and over the next 20 minutes, I watched Renata perform with a fluency that, under any other circumstance, I would have genuinely admired. She laughed at Gordon's remarks half a second too fast, referenced shared memories with Diane. Trips, restaurants, family moments got mentioned, and Diane followed along careful, the way somebody does when they're working from a script they've only half memorized. Gordon was sharper, asked me questions about the towing business, made relevant comments about commercial vehicle insurance rates, generally carried himself like a man who'd done his homework and was determined to be convincing. Everybody was acting. The whole table was a stage, and I sat there eating a fried catfish plate, being absolutely charming. So, Gordon, I said, setting my fork down with the relaxed calm of a man, without a worry in the world. Renata's told me a great deal about you. Clearly, you've had an important presence in her life. Gordon smiled. She's been like family to us. Like family. That's it. Exactly. Means an awful lot to us, I said. I looked at Renata when I said it. She smiled that radiant smile back at me. Keep smiling, sweetheart. I'm going to be honest with the two of you, I went on, leaning in slightly, the way I do in a negotiation when I want somebody to feel like I'm letting them in on something. My family takes things seriously when it comes to doing right by people. My kids would never forgive me if we didn't do this properly. I paused. We'd love to host an engagement dinner next Saturday. Nothing extravagant. Family, good food, a toast. My children just need to welcome the people who matter to Renata before we get to the altar. Gordon glanced at Diane. Half a second of silent calculation. we'd be honored. Renata grabbed my hand under the table so fast I felt it in my shoulder. Perfect, I said. I smiled at her. She smiled back, full, radiant, triumphant, the smile of a woman who believes she's already won. The trap was built. She just walked in smiling. Over the following 6 days, I moved quiet and precise. Monday, I went back to Watertown. Called Frank from the driveway before I even knocked. He opened the door before I finished knocking. We sat in the same kitchen, same coffee, same table. I told them about the lunch, about Gordon and Diane Ashwell, about the performance, about the engagement dinner I'd arranged. I told them I wanted them there. Dottie's hands went still around her cup. Walter, we don't want to make a scene. Dottie. I looked at her straight. My daughter's going to stand in a hall and welcome anybody who walks through those doors into our family. She deserves to know who she's really welcoming. I paused. And you've spent 2 years mailing birthday cards that came back unopened. You deserve to be in that room. Not for drama. Because you're her parents, and somebody has to say it out loud. Frank leaned over and covered Dottie's hand with his own. Looked at me. What time should we be there? Tuesday, I sat down with my son and my brother Ray in Dale's office and walked them through everything in detail. My son listened, asked 2 precise questions, then said, I'll handle the venue, picked up the phone, and that was that. Ray's reaction required immediate containment. I want to say something to her at the door, he growled, narrowing his eyes. No, Ray, you're not going to say one word, I told him, putting both hands on his shoulders. I need you to do something that's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. Not one word, until I stand up to make the toast. He looked at the ceiling, then at my son, who was biting the inside of his cheek. Fine, Ray finally hissed. But I want an extra helping of cornbread before anybody else sits down, and I'm holding the door when we walk out. I looked at him and nodded. That I can arrange. All the pieces were in place. The Cumberland House downtown was my son's choice, and it was the right one, a restaurant that felt like somebody's home, not a stage set. Private dining room in the back. White linen, candles, warm light. Marisol handled the menu herself and added a small framed photo of her late mother to the welcome table, because, she said, Carol should be there too. Frank and Dottie drove in from Watertown Saturday morning and checked into a hotel near the interstate. Frank called me Thursday night to confirm. His voice was steady and careful, and at the end of the call, after we'd gone over the details, he said quietly, Walter, whatever happens tomorrow in that room, thank you for coming to see us in Watertown, for knocking on that door. He paused. She chose well, even if she doesn't know it yet. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just told him, see you tomorrow, Frank. I pressed my suit Friday night, got into bed next to Renata, who was already asleep, already dreaming the version of tomorrow she'd built for herself. I lay there in the dark staring at the ceiling, thinking about a man in a faded Titans t-shirt watering tomato plants on Sycamore Street. A birthday card sealed with a red stamp on the front. A kitchen table where 2 people had been waiting quietly for 2 years for somebody to finally show up. Somebody was showing up tomorrow. They both were. You can build a lie as tall as you want, but the moment the right people walk through the door, all of it comes down. That Saturday morning I woke with a stillness that doesn't come from peace, it comes from certainty. I lay there a few minutes listening to Renata in the bathroom, the shower running, the hairdryer, the particular rhythm of a woman getting ready for a performance she believes she's already won. And I thought about Frank Kowalczyk pressing his one good jacket in a hotel room off the interstate. Dottie standing in front of a mirror trying to hold herself together. 2 people who'd driven 45 minutes down the interstate for a dinner their own daughter had no idea they'd been invited to. Get up, Walter. Let's finish this. Renata took 3 hours to get ready. 3 hours. I sat in the living room watching college football highlights, with the volume down low, and let her have every minute of it. She came out twice to ask my opinion. Once about earrings, once about shoes, and both times I told her. She looked beautiful. Because she did. That was never the issue. The issue was everything hiding underneath the beauty. She wanted to leave early to check the venue. I told her to go ahead, that I had one quick call to make and I'd see her there. She kissed my cheek, grabbed her coat, and walked out the door, like everything in her life was perfectly arranged. The second the door shut, I picked up my phone and called Frank. He answered on the first ring. "You doing all right?" I asked. "We're ready," he said. His voice was calm, steady, the voice of a man who'd made peace with a decision. "Dottie's dressed. We're ready." "Good. When I text you, you come in. Doesn't matter what's happening at that table. You just walk in and stand there. You don't have to say one word." A pause. "Frank." "Yeah. She's going to see you the second that door opens. I know it. I just want you ready for it." "Nico, I've been getting ready for 2 years," he said, catching himself. Then, "I've been ready since the night she blocked us. I've been ready every birthday Dottie's had since with no call coming." Another pause, shorter. "We'll be there." I held the phone a second after he hung up. Then I put my jacket on, checked for the ring in my inside pocket, and walked out. The Cumberland house on a Saturday night is exactly what it should be. Warm, welcoming, the smell of butter and rosemary meeting you at the door like an old friend. But the private room in back runs on a different frequency. Quieter, more intentional. White linens, low light, round tables set so everybody can see each other. Marisol had been there since 4 that afternoon. When I walked in at 6:30, she was adjusting the centerpiece flowers with the focused energy of a woman who understands that the details in a room just tell people how seriously you're taking things. She looked up when I came in and studied my face the way she has since she was old enough to have something to hide. "You okay?" "Yeah, sweetheart. You sure?" "I'm sure." Tora, she crossed the room and put both hands on my face. Looked at me a long moment. "Your mother," she said quietly, "used to say the truth always finds the most comfortable seat in the room, even when nobody invites it in." She straightened my collar. "Let it sit tonight." I nearly lost it right there. Nearly. Dale was over by the bar talking to Ray's boy, already dressed in his charcoal suit, completely composed. He gave me a nod when I walked up. Slow, steady. That nod said, "Everything's ready. The room's set. Do what you need to do." Ray was sitting at a side table with a plate of cornbread and the focused expression of a man carrying out a solemn duty. He looked at me, pointed at the plate, then pointed at himself. His version of, "I held up my end. Don't forget yours." I nearly smiled. They arrived at 7. I heard Renata's laugh in the hallway before the door even opened. That particular social laugh, half a note higher than her real one, the one she uses when she wants a room to feel like a party before she's even walked into it. She came in first. Navy dress, hair perfect, every detail in place. Gordon Ashwell followed, silver-haired, expensive suit, moving with the natural authority of a man who's never once doubted his right to be somewhere. Diane beside him, polished and refined, pearls at her collarbone. Renata moved through that room like she owned it, kissed Marisol on both cheeks, shook Dale's hand with both of hers. Laughed at something Diane said near the drinks table and touched her arm fondly. She was magnificent, genuinely, terrifyingly magnificent. When she reached my side, she slid her arm through mine and leaned in. "This is perfect," she whispered. "Your family is incredible. This is everything I wanted." "I know," I said. "That's why I did it." She heard a compliment. I meant something else entirely. We sat. Food came. Grilled trout, lamb chops, a spread my daughter had designed herself. Fresh bread came out wrapped in cloth. The table filled with the warm noise of a real family dinner. Gordon was charming and attentive, asking Dale about the business with what looked like genuine interest. Diane complimented Marisol on the venue choice, and Marisol accepted the compliment graciously while privately thinking things I'll never fully understand. Renata was glowing, relaxed, victorious. I ate, laughed at the right moments, refilled glasses, asked questions, and on the surface was a man completely at ease, enjoying a family dinner. My phone sat face down in my jacket pocket. I had a text to send. I was waiting for the right moment. That moment came at 8:15, in the short lull between the main course and whatever was supposed to come next. The table was warm, the wine was flowing, and Renata was laughing at something Gordon had said. I pulled out my phone and typed one word to Frank. Then I stood up, tapped a knife against a glass. That clean, clear sound that tells a room, "Stop." Listen, the table settled. Renata looked at me with that full, radiant smile, the smile of a woman who thinks the next 60 seconds are going to be a toast about how much he loves her. I let the silence run a beat longer than felt comfortable. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. My voice was calm, even. In the way my father used to speak when something really mattered to our family, a dinner like this isn't just a nice evening, it's a statement. It's us saying, these people are real, these people matter. We don't say that lightly. I looked slowly around the table. My father taught me that the people you choose to bring into a moment like this tell you exactly who you are. I paused. So I want to make sure tonight we've got the right people at this table. I glanced at the restaurant manager standing near the back wall. He'd been briefed. He knew his cue. He walked to the side door and opened it. And then Frank and Dottie Kowalczyk walked in. Frank in a navy blazer that didn't fit him quite like it used to, the kind you can tell he's had for years and saves for occasions that matter. Dottie, in a burgundy dress, a small handbag held with both hands, chin up, moving with the quiet dignity of a woman who'd decided she wasn't going to fall apart in public, whatever came next. They crossed that threshold into the silence of the room, and Renata saw them. I was watching her face. I'd positioned myself exactly to watch her face. The color drained, like a tide pulling back, fast, complete, total. Her lips parted. Her hand, the one holding her wine glass, went completely still. The glass tipped. I reached over without looking at her and steadied it, set it down easy on the linen. She turned to me. Her eyes were running the fast math of somebody trying to find the story that saves her. I could watch it happening in real time. The search for the exit, the angle, the version of this she could still control. Walter, her voice came out thin, almost nothing. I went to Watertown, I said, quiet, not for the room. I wasn't performing for an audience. I talked to them 3 weeks ago. Drove up I-41 Saturday morning because I told myself, maybe I can fix this for her. Maybe I can give her family back as a wedding gift. I let that land. Found a man watering tomatoes on Sycamore Street in a Titans t-shirt. Told him my name and he dropped the garden hose. The room had gone tight with tension. Renata, your father worked the railroad 34 years. Your mother was a church secretary most of your childhood. They put you through college and did it without you owing a dollar because they wanted you to have every chance. My voice stayed level, steady. They offered you $12,000 from their retirement, and you told them if they couldn't fund your life, they didn't exist in it. She opened her mouth. You don't understand everything that happened when I sat in their kitchen, I said quietly, like a door closing. I saw your school pictures on the refrigerator. I held the birthday card you mailed to our address, unopened. I paused. And while I was sitting there, you texted me saying your parents had apologized and wanted to meet me for lunch. I turned to Gordon and Diane Ashwell. Diane had both hands flat on the table in front of her, her face gone completely pale. Gordon had gone still. Gordon, Diane, I said, my voice shifting to something calm and respectful. I know exactly what she told you. She told you my family was deeply judgmental, that her biological parents had passed away years ago, and she asked you to act as her honorary family mentors so she wouldn't have to face a Southern wedding alone. She used your kindness and your standing as a tool to fill 2 empty chairs in a play. I gestured toward Frank and Dottie, standing near the door. But those are her real parents. Diane looked at Renata, a long, slow look, the kind that doesn't need words because words would be insufficient anyway. Then she looked at Frank and Dottie, and something crossed her face that was much worse than anger. It was recognition, the specific recognition of a woman who's just understood that the person she thought she knew doesn't exist. Gordon didn't say anything. He folded his napkin, set it on the table, the gesture of a man leaving who's decided there's nothing worth saying first. I turned to Renata one last time. She'd stopped looking for the exit. There wasn't one, and she knew it. She just looked at me, eyes bright, jaw tight. The whole architecture of everything she'd built was reflected on every face in that room. I grew up watching my father treat people, all people, like they mattered. The man who parks the cars, the woman who cleans the office, the retired railroad man from Watertown who gives everything and gets told it isn't enough. I reached into my jacket pocket. That's the measure I was raised on. Not the address, not the job title, not the clothes. I looked at her. By that measure, I don't know who you are. I took the ring out of my pocket, set it down on the white linen in front of her. Not thrown, not dramatic, just placed. Quiet. The way you set something down when you've been carrying it too long and you're finally ready to let it go for good. Then I picked up the floral centerpiece from our table. White flowers. Simple, my daughter's choice. And crossed the room to where Dottie Kowalczyk stood. She was fighting it. You could see the effort in her jaw, in her shoulders, in the way she was breathing, short and careful. The way people breathe when they're holding something enormous and can't afford to let it drop in public. I held out the flowers. She looked at them, looked at me, and then broke completely. Not a shout. A small sound, the kind that comes after 2 years of stacked-up grief finally finding somewhere to land. Frank had his arm around her before she could even finish the sound. His jaw was tight, his eyes wet, his chin firm. He pulled her in and looked at me over the top of her head. And then he did something I didn't expect. He stepped forward. One step. Dottie still curled under his arm, and he stuck out his free hand. I shook it. He gripped it hard. The grip of a man saying something his voice still couldn't quite manage. I held it a moment, then stepped back. My son was beside me. I don't know exactly when he'd moved. Dale Hutchins shows up when it matters. That's just what he does. He looked at Frank Kowalczyk a moment, then stepped forward and put his hand out. I'm Dale, he said. Should have met you a long time ago. I'm sorry. Frank shook his hand and swallowed once. Frank, a breath out. Thank you for raising a man like this. My son glanced at me sideways. Just for a second. Just long enough. In 38 years, I'd never seen him that proud. My daughter didn't shake Dottie's hand. She pulled her into a full hug, both arms, immediate, unconditional, the way women in our family hug the people who need to be held. Dottie clung to her. The flowers were still in her hands. We walked out together, the Hutchins and the Kowalczyks. Marisol's arm was linked through Dottie's. My son and Frank walked side by side with the quiet ease of two men who'd just recognized something in each other. Ray held the door on the way out. He stopped once at the front and just turned back to look. I looked back too. Renata was sitting in the middle of that table in her perfect dress, in her perfectly built life, the ring on the linen in front of her, the centerpiece gone. Gordon and Diane Ashwell stood near the back of the room. Diane already had her coat on, Gordon's hand at the small of her back, neither of them looking at Renata as they moved toward the exit. Her friends, the social circle she'd built, performed for, and constructed her entire second identity around, sat frozen in their chairs with the particular discomfort of people who've just witnessed something they can't forget and don't know what to do with their hands. Nobody went to her. Nobody pulled her aside. Nobody offered a version of events that made her look better. Nobody played the part she needed because there weren't any parts left to play. The whole cast had left. She just sat there, finally, irreversibly, seen. Ray looked at her a long moment, then shook his head once, slow, almost sad, and let the door close behind him. Outside on the sidewalk, in the clean September air, downtown Nashville moved around us like it had no idea what had just happened inside that restaurant. I stood next to my son and took a deep breath. He put his hand on the back of my neck, something he's done since he was a boy. Didn't say anything for a moment. Then, Mom would have done the same thing. That was it. That was all he said. Across the sidewalk, Frank Kowalczyk was looking out at the skyline, Dottie tucked under his arm, the white flowers still in her hands. Both of them breathing the same clean September air, like people who'd just gotten back something they'd stopped hoping to see again. Frank caught me watching him. Nodded once. Not a thank you. Exactly. Something there wasn't quite a word for. I nodded back. Some deals. Close for profit. Some you close because there isn't any version of yourself you can live with that walks away from the table. That night I closed the most important deal of my life. And I didn't make a dime on it. Some women lie to erase the people who love them best. She built an entire life on top of that erasure. And one Saturday night in September, in the back room of a restaurant on the Cumberland River, every floor of it came down. You never really lose people by distance, only by silence. A phone call unmade, a card left unopened, a chair left empty at the table. That's how families quietly fade. But it only takes one person willing to knock on a door, to ask instead of assume, to bring someone home instead of writing them off. Love doesn't need a grand gesture. It just needs someone to show up. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI purely for entertainment, though we hope its gentle life lesson stays with you all the same.